All right, man, peace. So the Colin Kaepernick narrative has taken on a new twist and turn with the removal of the Carolina Panthers owner, Jerry Richardson, and the introduction of Sean P. Diddy Combs. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Antonietta, thank you kindly. So Diddy was serious about wanting to buy the Panthers. In a report by Yahoo Sports citing multiple sources, he's meeting with potential investors in hopes of shaping a prospective ownership group that would include Colin Kaepernick.
Just the fact that the prospective ownership group is going to include Colin Kaepernick should tell those of us who are astute and pay attention that this is not serious. This is part of a narrative. First off, if Sean Combs is going to be allowed any form of ownership in the team, I guarantee you that he will play the mascot very similar to the role that Jay-Z played while he was quote unquote allegedly owner of the Brooklyn Nets. This is all part of a narrative. That's why Colin Kaepernick wanted to be involved in this. Colin Kaepernick probably barely has enough money to wipe his ass, to be quite honest with you. From the perspective of being an NFL owner, how much money did Colin Kaepernick generate in his career that he could be a sizable component of an ownership group, that they would float his name out there? It doesn't even make sense that they would float his name out if they were serious about really being the owners of an NFL franchise, especially with the way that he has alienated himself from the elite level of the NFL, that being their current ownership. It just doesn't make any sense unless you consider that this is part of the narrative. Now, I touched on this in previous Colin Kaepernick videos, that they may arrange some form of a plot twist to try to get Colin Kaepernick involved in the NFL again in some way, shape, or form. And this seems to be the stratagem.
Stephen A., you actually spoke to Diddy. Should he buy the Panthers?
I think he should. I think he should be allowed to, but he doesn't get to make that call. Remember, they have to let you in.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And beyond that, Sean Combs has a net worth of $820 million. So that's not enough to be an owner of an NFL team when all those other owners are billionaires. That's number one. But number two, isn't it interesting that the team that they're allowing Sean Combs to allegedly show interest in buying, and the team that Colin Kaepernick wants to be a partial owner of, is the Carolina Panthers, as in Black Panthers? As soon as Sean Combs sent out the tweet to alert the public at large about his interest in the Panthers, Colin Kaepernick shot off a tweet to follow up. Isn't that interesting? Now, what would make Colin Kaepernick believe that he should be a partial owner of the Carolina Panthers when the average owner is a billionaire? And I'm sure that Colin Kaepernick's net worth is not even 8 figures. I doubt if his net worth is even 8 figures. But this guy is allegedly trying to be part of the visible aspect of the Carolina Panther ownership. Now, Sean Combs is on record as allegedly stating, this alleged, that should he become the owner, that Colin Kaepernick will have an opportunity to start a quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. So that should show anyone who's paying attention what this whole thing is really about. That is to continue the concerted attempt to implode the NFL by introducing the woke element. So to me, it's obvious that Sean Diddy Combs is directly affiliated with the so-called Black Lives Matter movement, which means that he is most likely closely affiliated with Mr. George Soros. That's what's apparent to me.
You got to remember, once upon a time, Bill Cosby, many years ago, back in the 80s or the 90s, I believe, had aspirations of getting involved in the NFL. But that is a good old boys club that has to allow you in. You don't just get to come in.
Bill Cosby also at one time tried to buy NBC.
just because you have the money. If that was the case, Donald Trump would be NFL owner instead of president of the United States, because he wanted to own the Buffalo Bills, if you recall, and he wasn't let in by the National Football League. So they'd have to capitulate. In the case of P. Diddy, it's something he's very seriously contemplating. There are no final decisions that have been made in terms of my conversation with him, but he is highly interested, obviously.
It's not a matter of him being highly interested. He clearly wants to do it. It's not a matter of contemplation. It's a matter of how are they going to make it feasible for him to be a visible owner of the NFL when he is not wealthy enough to own an NFL team. To be an NFL owner, you have to have billions. So for him to ask for investors, who are these investors that he's going to ask to front him the money to buy this team? Once again, for Colin Kaepernick to chime in so quickly, for the team to be the Carolina Panthers, due to Kaepernick's affiliation with the Black Lives Matter movement, it's obvious to me that one of the investors or main investors who was going to try to make Sean Combs the front man for ownership for the Carolina Panthers is George Soros. Has to be. By deductive reasoning, that's the only thing that I can come up with at this moment. But we'll see as additional factoids are brought to the forefront.
Definitely the African-American community is something that we all welcome because we...
Well, speak for yourself. Sean Combs is a Boulay brother of yours. He's a fellow Luciferian. He's also an MK handler. For those of you who don't know, Cassie is a MK sex kitten of his. I don't know if you guys remember, but a few years ago, maybe 7-8 years ago, Cassie released a series of photos where she it was a series of photos. This was back during the craze where all the chicks were shaving the side of their head. A lot of Black and Hispanic females were doing that. Many of them don't know that that hairstyle goes back to the punk rock, the metal hairstyle from the late 70s, where Caucasian women were doing that. And that is something that occurs in the satanic ritual abuse circles, the mind control circles. Anyway, Cassie had publicized a series of photos where she shaved her head, and she also threw up the Manu Cornuto hand sign. So basically, the series of photos read, "I love Satan." Right? I love Satan. The first photo showed her eye, and then the next one showed showed love. I think she showed like a heart symbol, a heart tattoo on her neck. I'll probably link the photos to the back of the video if I can find them. And then the third photo showed her throwing up the Manu Cornuto hand sign. But to make a long story short, Cassie is a monarch slave of P. Diddy. For those of you who keep wondering how come she stays with him and all this other stuff, her rapport with him is the same as Beyonce's rapport with Jay-Z. Jay-Z is Beyonce's handler. She's not going anywhere. Okay? Everything they show in the mainstream media in regards to those two, that shit is just for fodder. For people who have a basic understanding, who think that they're quote unquote in love. Jay-Z has her keys. Okay, just like Sean Combs has Cassie's keys. And this is why he's being pushed to be a potential owner for the Carolina Panthers. His sponsors, the Black Lives Matter conglomerate, that being George Soros, and the Luciferian, his Luciferian banking investors from Europe, they're the ones who are going to try to make sure that he can own the Carolina Panthers.
We believe that the National Football League, the #1 sport in America, the only minority owner in all of sports, isn't even from America. He's from Pakistan. And it's Shad Khan for the Jacksonville Jaguars. It would be beautiful if a group led by P. Diddy himself could ultimately end up owning an NFL team. Remember, he's been the wealthiest artist in the hip-hop industry, according to Forbes magazine, for the last 6 years.
Isn't that amazing? Seeing as Sean Combs is no longer a mainstream top-level artist. Now, we know that he owns a lot of top artists. But it's just very, very interesting. It shows you how well connected Sean Combs is in the record industry. They make sure that he keeps his money rolling in. When you see people like Jay-Z, Sean Combs, Dr. Dre, and I know that certain pro-black Negroes will listen to this and get upset. Oh, how come everybody black who's successful had to sell out? Look, when you get to that level where you're making hundreds of millions of dollars, it's based off of what they allow. It's not based off of what you're doing. And many people might not understand that. I'm not saying that Sean Combs is not a talented music executive. I'm not saying that Dr. Dre is not a talented music producer or that Jay-Z is not a talented rapper. But when you attain to a certain level, every time you rise up, there are a series of gatekeepers that you have to appease to get through that gate to get to the next level. So when you get to the highest levels like those three guys are at, it's all about your affiliations, your associations, and who you appease. And all three of those Negroes are boule. When you get to the boule, basically you're acting as an intermediary between high-level Caucasian Luciferians, aka billionaires, and the masses at large. Your job is to dispense the message of the boule, of the Caucasian elite, in a way where the masses will trust that message because it's coming from someone who looks like them. In return, you get rewarded with fame that is not allowed to run out. And you also are afforded certain opportunities like this one to buy the Carolina Black Panthers.
P. Diddy is worth in excess of $820 million. It's a real possibility that he may be very interested in pursuing this. It's something that he says it's very important to him, and he thinks it's very important to our community. And I absolutely agree with him. And in defense of P. Diddy, let me just be the first to put it out on Front Street right now. I don't want to hear a damn thing about background, some of the issues that he's had in terms of assault charges, got into it with a UCLA coach because of his son, got into something in 1999 at the club, if I remember correctly. There has been a checkered past, no doubt about that.
Yeah, but I mean, none of that shit is relevant. The things that I say about Sean Combs or any of these people is more based on their ideological bent and their affiliations, which to me are a tip-off in regards to what their true motivations are. It's very obvious that that Diddy's sponsors want him in a position of power so that he can execute certain strategies to cause confusion if they need it, because they can't find an owner who they can have assist them. So once they have Diddy in as an owner, then they can apply that pressure from above, and they can have the players apply the pressure from below, known as the Hegelian dialectic. What went wrong with the Kaepernick issue was that they didn't have an owner that they could count on to put pressure on the other owners to allow Kaepernick to bring the confusion and the chaos into the NFL that they wanted to have happen, to turn the NFL into a woke league. Once you turn the NFL into a woke league like the NBA is, then you can wantonly push things like homosexuality and transgenderism through the NFL. Right? The Michael Sam experiment failed. The Colin Kaepernick agenda kind of petered out. Now they're trying to get it back reinvigorated.
But it's exactly that, the past. He's a law-abiding citizen. He endorses products like Ciroc and other things. On top of it all, he's wealthy beyond measure. And also, don't let me get started with some of the things in these owners' backgrounds if we were to dig into them as well. We have a minority audience out here that vastly supports the National Football League product. We need minority ownership in the National Football League. And I have no doubt that P. Diddy can get a group of investors together along with himself that will have more than enough money to pay in excess of the $2.3 billion that Jerry Richardson's Carolina Panthers are now worth.
Well, I have no doubt that he will most likely be able to find those investors as well, because the investors most likely have already been laid out. The investors who will attempt to bankroll Sean P. Diddy Combs most likely already told him about what was going to happen with Jerry Richardson weeks in advance, which allowed him to jump up and step up to the table, which also precipitated Kaepernick. I mean, people don't see how strange it is that Kaepernick, who's normally very taciturn, he decided that he's going to jump up and retweet or, pardon me, respond to Sean Combs' tweet and say, I want in. I mean, it's more understandable Steph Curry, because at least Steph Curry is a Carolina native. I'm on record as stating that Steph Curry is a Monarch athlete as well. But it's just very interesting that Kaepernick just jumped into the fray on this. And the only connection that I can see, which is the one that makes the most sense, is that both Kaepernick and Diddy are affiliates of the Black Lives Matter movement, and Sean Combs is most likely in close contact with George Soros or his interest group. I believe they call the Open Society Foundation. Would not shock me at all.
And the only other thing that I would say, Max Kellerman, before passing it along to you is this. I would tell if I had more time, because I had to run out, because I had meetings with the boss and what have you. But had I had more time.
And look at this at the bottom there, the bottom left, if you guys could see it. It's probably only partially visible on my screen here, but it says Panther Power. Once again, that's an allusion to the Black Panthers. Okay? This whole thing is a big, long storyline, narrative, ritual that's being played out to try to destroy the NFL. Right? Either the NFL is going to conform to the whims of the super liberal Marxists who want to make the NFL a dispensary of propaganda to promote feminism and transgenderism, homosexuality, or they're just going to cripple it. That's how it's going to go. And there's more than one Monarch athlete in the NFL that they can activate. So Kaepernick was just the main one, but there's some others in there. As we can see, in my view, Michael Bennett is another one. He clearly has mental issues.
I would tell P. Diddy this, and I will tell everybody in the African-American community this. Shut the hell up.
Yeah, because we all know Stephen A. Smith. We all know that people in the quote-unquote African-American community, they take you so seriously. You're definitely a leader in the so-called African-American community due to your high-level understanding of basketball.
About Colin Kaepernick being a part owner. Not if you want to get in this club. If you got a hard time with Colin Kaepernick getting a job in the NFL as a backup quarterback when we know he deserves it, what do you think the chances are going to be for P. Diddy or anybody else associated with Colin Kaepernick buying an NFL team and being allowed to get into that good old boys club if Colin Kaepernick is front and center as a part owner of the group? That stuff will never happen if he's going to be a part of the group. They weren't willing to let him in as a backup quarterback. They damn sure ain't going to let him in as a part owner. So kill that noise. Colin Kaepernick doesn't need to be a part of this equation. No knock against him, but his situation is not going to be conducive to an African-American ultimately becoming an owner in the National Football League if he is a part of that ownership group. We all need to kill that noise.
I understand where you're coming from, Steve, but the real question is, why is Kaepernick trying to be a part of the ownership group in the first place? This is a guy who most likely has what? At the most, if he has 8 figures to his name, what, maybe $10, $15 million in the bank? What will make him think that he could be a part of an ownership group for a team that's worth almost $2.5 billion? I mean, how much is he going to chip in? This is a guy who you can't get to come out of his shell unless he's receiving some type of honorary award. You can't find a man. But all of a sudden, a football team is up for sale, and he's the second person to state that he wants in on an ownership group? Okay.
Okay, there's a lot here.
Yeah, there sure is. I hope that you know what you're looking at.
First of all, so Diddy wants to buy the Panthers, which I think he called the North Carolina Panthers the other day, right? No, it's the Carolina Panthers, and
don't matter.
And Puff wants to buy him, right? Well, it speaks to his level of interest in the sport and everything. There's a lot going on here. First, let's deal with minority, in particular African-American ownership, or the lack thereof, in the NFL. That's a real problem. And
No, that's really not a real problem. The real problem is the lack of willingness for many of these quote-unquote affluent blacks to want to form their own league. Our people have deeper problems than not owning an NFL team.
And it's a real problem because unless you want to infer that African American people are somehow worse at making money than European American people, or than other kinds of people. And I don't think that anyone would make that argument.
Well, they might try to make that argument, but they'd be wrong. It's just that so-called black people are worse at spending money than most other nations of people because our people have a very low understanding of culture, of their own culture, I should say, because they have no understanding of their own history. And that's willful due to the station that our people are in this society, where they're constantly being inundated with color paradigms like black and white that are supposed to represent race. Like that, look, man, there's just the issues that afflict our people right now are really beyond the scope of a conversation for this sports show. But they are going to come up whenever there is the potential for a so-called black man to run a franchise. So, as usual, the Caucasian Jewish liberal is going to try to act as if he has an understanding of a lot of the racial components that have contributed to the downfall of our people, the consistent downfall. But he really don't know what the hell he's talking about. But that's okay. A lot of his misrepresentations will provide a platform or backdrop for me to make my own statements.
Then obviously the lack of ownership reflects the lack of wealth in the African-American community compared to other communities. And where does that...
Well, it's hard to say that the so-called black community is lacking wealth when our people are the biggest consumers. So the money's coming from somewhere. It's just that the money's being spent poorly. When you have over $1 billion being spent per year on hair weaves, and, Lord knows how many other billions being spent on other objects that are really of no value, it's hard to say that our people don't have quote unquote racial wealth. It's just that they're spending it on things that are non-essential.
Where does that come from? That comes from systemic oppression that traces back to the original sin of this country.
Okay, so then empty your bank account, then, man, and give it to the first Negro that you see.
Slavery. So we see that there is a problem. It's an ongoing problem. It's a problem of social injustice, really, and the reverberations of that. And it needs to be addressed so that when there's an African-American candidate, maybe they do not have to be quite as well-heeled as other candidates for the NFL to want to take a look. Stephen A., you say that Diddy is rich beyond measure. In fact, you can measure it. It's $820 million, and by the standards of...
That's alleged. I mean, you're talking about overall assets, and, when people come up with those type of totals, they're talking about how much money he's made over his lifetime, not how much money he has right now.
Of owners in the NFL, that makes him broke practically. But we've seen other owners in other sports front groups where they personally haven't had the wealth, but they fronted investor groups like Magic Johnson, like Derek Jeter, and like what Diddy would try to do here. And I don't see why he couldn't raise that money with investors. Now,
I'm sure that he will. I'm sure that, as I've stated, I'm sure that those investors have already told him what's going to befall Jerry Richardson, and here's what we need you to do.
Now, in terms of his transgressions and the past and the kind of guy they want owning an NFL franchise, Stephen, I actually disagree with you here. I think that his past, especially his recent past, meaning the last decade or so, is relevant because it could speak to his state of mind, whether he's stable and all that kind of stuff. I think that's very different. I want to make the distinction here, Stephen A., between that and, say, someone like if Jay-Z wanted to buy, and they said, well, you used to hustle drugs, what about it? That's bad, you can't do that in your past. Then I would feel differently. Then I would say marginalized groups, members of marginalized groups throughout the history of this country, usually immigrant groups, but also African-American groups, disenfranchised groups, have frequently used kind of extra-legal channels.
Well, look, the Rooneys, they own Pittsburgh. They own the Pittsburgh Steelers. And they were involved in bootlegging. They were involved in the Irish Mafia, allegedly. The DeBartlows, who used to own the 49ers, they were directly associated with Sam Giancana, allegedly. So many of these owners have mob ties or drug dealing ties. And of course, the drug during the Prohibition era was alcohol. Oh, look, that's not the point. The point is trying to understand or trying to figure out what the connection is between Sean Combs and Colin Kaepernick and what their mutual connection would be. because it wouldn't be a point-to-point connection. It would be a triangular connection. In other words, trying to understand who their mutual sponsor is. And I have no doubt that that is the quote-unquote Black Lives Matter movement, which is just a tentacle or a front for the Open Society Foundation, which is ran by Mr. George Soros. The same person, by the way, and I mentioned this before, who funded the net neutrality laws. You know, those laws that everybody thinks is going to stop them from being able to get to their favorite website without paying an additional fee, even though your dumbass is already paying for your internet through your cable bill, which goes up whenever your cable package deal runs out, right? They raise up your cable package every time your cable package deal runs out, and you don't complain about that. You know, when you watch cable and they make you pay extra to watch HBO or certain ESPN channels, you don't say, oh, well, you stopped my free speech. But that's neither here nor there. No, my brain just works a little bit differently. So I don't try to fight it. I just listen to what my brain comes up with, and I trust it. And when I look at things like Sean Combs and Colin Kaepernick coming out of nowhere to run the Black Panthers, it tells me that there's some mischievousness afoot.
To acquire wealth before they have been able to enter the mainstream, because
mischief, pardon me.
Mainstream legal channels for making money, the opportunity simply wasn't as open to them as for other people. This is an ongoing story in American life. The Italian mafia, Jewish, Irish mobs, the same thing. These are it. So the fact that Jay-Z or someone like that were to have a drug history, selling drugs in his past, to me, is actually less relevant than Diddy, if in the last 10 or 15 years there are multiple examples of him getting into trouble because of the decisions he makes and the behavior of his as an adult. I think the NFL would have to take a serious look at that. So that's where I stand.
I also think, and this is assuming that Diddy purchasing the team and being up for scrutiny by the other NFL owners would be on the up and up. They would also have to examine what the image is that Sean Combs would have planned for the Carolina Panthers. Are they going to be another outlet for you to try to promote your artists and your music? Is this going to be the hip hop franchise of the NFL? Is this going to be the home for a lot of Discordian ideologies to be pushed forth? This would be something that you have to consider if you're the NFL owners. Right now, the NFL really has been grabbed by the proverbial balls by a lot of these Marxist movements that have come together against them. That's why I said they're in trouble. Okay? The NFL is in trouble because they are under attack and they don't seem to understand who's attacking them and in what ways they're being attacked.
Stand on it all. I wouldn't rule it out of hand. I'd say given Diddy's history in the last 10 or 15 years since he became a really rich guy, there may be cause for concern, but I absolutely agree in terms of the lack of representation of groups that are not old white guys among NFL owners, particularly African-American owners.
Well, first of all, the NFL has to be careful. We live in a society today where we had an individual who was associated with child molestation being allowed to run for the Senate seat. We have unsavory characters that are in our government, okay?
Yeah, well, Stephen A., not to digress, bro, but child molestation, or pederasty as it's so called, is one of the core tenets of Thelema, of Luciferianism, which is at the undercurrent or the underbelly of the elite here in America and many various factions. For those of you who don't know, one of the fastest rising quote-unquote religions in America is Wicca or witchcraft. So really, people who have been practicing these various ideologies or these concepts, these quote-unquote religions, they're just starting to come out from hiding. And, that's why the scriptures tell you that the last days in this society would be like in the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, or like in the days of Noah.
Okay, and when you live in a society that allows that, don't tell me that somebody with a checkered past can't be allowed to own an NFL team, particularly when that is exactly that, the past, when in recent memory he's been an ideal citizen, not to mention the fact that he has the pockets deep enough to make things happen. Him and Jay-Z alone are reportedly worth in excess of over $1.3 billion.
Right, but what does that actually mean, Steve? When they say that you're worth that, you don't have that. You're worth that. So when you're worth something as opposed to having something, that means that you're worth it to someone else. You understand? If Sean Combs and Jay-Z are a combined $1.5 billion in net worth, an asset to someone else. So the only question is, who is it that Sean Combs is an asset to, that he's worth $820 million? That's like having a stock or a bond that is worth something. That's how Sean Combs is viewed by his sponsors. This is what he's worth. Because he can be the tool that we use to put forth our message to a core audience.
And that doesn't even take into account the other ownership partners that can come into the fray. We're talking about Jerry Richardson selling the Carolina Panthers, right? Last time I checked, he only owns 48% of the Carolina Panthers. They were purchased for $206 million. They're now worth over $2.3 billion. But 52% of that ownership comes from businessmen in the Charlotte and North Carolina community, various business partners. So you don't have to necessarily do it all yourself. The fact is, Richardson had deep enough pockets to validate his portion. P. Diddy could do the same. Jay-Z could do the same. The collaborative efforts on the part of both of them could do the same. The people that they would bring in, wouldn't it just be African Americans, because they do business with white folks all the time.
Yeah, that's the point. That's really what you wanted to get to in your long-winded rant. Is that, don't worry, Massa, we gonna bring in some good white folk too. That's really what it's about, bro. Is that you guys are still trying to get that hug. That's all. In a roundabout way, you guys are still trying to force that hug. Look at Stephen A. Smith's face. We just want that hug, Massa. And when I say Massa, I'm talking about a lot of you woke pro-black Negroes. As I've stated numerous times, a lot of you internet revolutionaries, y'all are just aggressively trying to find a way to force a relationship with the Caucasian. Okay?
And other folks who don't
But Stephen A., do you understand?
So you're talking about
agree
them
with
saying,
that.
and it's important.
I agree with that, but do you understand my distinction I'm making is not like, how did this person acquire their fortune? And then some things are disqualifying, the NFL doesn't want to touch it. I would actually disagree with that, and you alluded to it earlier. If you look into how many acquired their fortunes in the history of this country, particularly family fortunes that are inherited, you can have all kinds of red flags. The difference here with Diddy, and I wouldn't rule him out, but the NFL would have to take a serious look, is his behavior as an adult when he already became wealthy, because that group of people, it's not the same thing as running for office, where people's opinions to disqualify you will show up in the ballot box or not. This is a private business.
Stephen A., you had a last comment?
The bottom line is this. You've got owners that have checkered past as well. Let's look into everybody's past if we're going to look into P. Diddy, point number one. And point number two, I'm already getting idiotic texts from people that I love dearly, that my friends talking about, you know what, why not Colin Kaepernick? That's just ignorant. They won't let him back in the league as a quarterback. What in God's name makes you think they would let him be a part of an ownership group and embrace that ownership group if they don't even want to let him be a quarterback? It's bigger than Colin Kaepernick.
Well, it's really not bigger than Colin Kaepernick, Stephen A. It's really all about Colin Kaepernick. He's an important component to the ownership group. And that's why he came out so quickly to follow up P. Diddy's tweet. To show, look, I'm back. Like the movie Poltergeist. I'm back. But Colin Kaepernick has become a huge martyr amongst woke Negroes and the internet revolutionaries and the I just want to hug conglomerate of protesters. He's big with them. So, of course, they want to see Colin Kaepernick back. It's like the return of a Messiah figure. That's how easy it is to lead and mislead a lot of these delusional, dysfunctional Negroes, to be quite honest with you. So you could look at the look on Stephen A's face. He's so frustrated. He's like, Colin, you're not going to stop me from getting this hug. And Colin Kaepernick's like, Stephen A., you're not going to stop me from getting this hug. There's only one hug between the two of us, and I'm getting it. Oh, boy.
It's bigger
Agreed.
than him.
Okay.
Agreed, but personally, would you like to see Colin Kaepernick be part of an ownership
No.
group? How awesome!
No.
Neither would I. Neither would I. And the reason why Max Kellerman is saying that he would like to see it, and the reason why Molly Karam is smiling, is because they're all agents of chaos. Brothers, look, man. you brothers gonna find, as you continue to pay attention, that things start to get really simplified when you pay attention in a certain way. A lot of these people's motivations are not what they claim. It's really just to promote discord. As I tell you brothers all the time, the woman is an agent of chaos. The Caucasian liberal is an agent of chaos. And the internet revolutionary, or the woke Negro, is an agent of chaos. They all just want to see the world burn. They have no idea what type of functionality that they would create. They don't even know. They just want to see destruction. And Stephen A. Smith is a boule Negro. He's concerned that his sponsor's house will burn down because he's benefiting so much from it in his mind. So he cannot even conceive of a world that's built by him and for him. You understand? And this is why I reject the modern day woke usage of that term coon. Because if we really were to apply the term coon, it would really apply just as much to woke Negroes as it would to the boule Negro. Because both factions are equally idiotic, and both of them really have the same motivation, which is to be validated by the Caucasian. They both think that they're fooling people, or everyone, but they're not fooling me, not with that bullshit. But let's see what happens with this latest stratagem by the international banking conglomerate, whose main emissary in regards to promoting discord, particularly amongst the so-called blacks of America, is this George Soros character. I have very little doubt that P. Diddy has met George Soros and is most likely some form of comrade with George Soros. And when I say comrade, I mean in the Marxist sense. Oh, man, you can't make this stuff up. Anyway, peace. All right, so now this is just to provide some context to a statement that I made in the video pertaining to Sean P. Diddy Combs, as well as Colin Kaepernick being prospective owners of the Carolina Black Panthers. I mentioned how Cassie, the singer, also the paramour of Sean Combs, is an MKUltra sex kitten. And I remember a few years ago, she had released a series of photos where in sequence, it was meant to convey the message of I love Pan, or I love the Baphomet. And it was 3 photos. The first one was her just showing her eye, which is this photo right here. And if you see the sweatshirt that she's wearing, the sweatshirt has the skull on it. Why? Because her man, Sean Combs, is a member of the Boule, which is just the black version of the Skull and Bones. Okay? They venerate Lucifer, or as he was known in antiquity, Cush. Right? Lucifer is really the triumvirate of Cush, Semiramis, and Nimrod. Okay? So this was the first photo. The second photo was her showing a heart tattoo. And the third photo was this right here. As you can see, she's throwing up the Manu Cornuto hand sign. And she's also doing the as above, so below, where the right hand is up in the air and the left hand is downward. She's just trying to act as if she's looking at her watch. But the point being is that she's trying to convey I love the Baphomet, or I love Lucifer, or I love Pan, whichever term you prefer. It's all talking about the same entity. Okay? And she is a servant of P. Diddy. She couldn't go anywhere even if she wanted to. He has her keys. In the same way that Jay-Z has the keys for Beyonce. A lot of people don't truly understand what's going on in these various industries and, who these people are motivated by. But anyway, I'm sure, as I stated in the video, I'm sure that this narrative will continue. Peace.